Mad Max is a third-person action-adventure, oh god, haven't we heard those words before, set in an open world of Australia with lots and lots of desert. It was produced by Avalanche and published by Warner Bros. Interactive.
Mad Max's story is built around insanity, guts and cars. Mostly cars. You begin the game stranded out in the desert by some gang leader named Skrullis, which you kill by placing a chainsaw up his head. Immediately after, like if some miracle happened, you are saved by the hunchback from Notre Dame, which is also a black figure and owns a car. He is willing to help you, not just because you struck his head on the car door, no, Max doesn't do that. Max is pretty calm, and he likes people. He doesn't do that kind of thing. Apparently, Max also has anger management issues, which would explain the fact that he does not like to feel pity. Nearly everyone you meet gets bullied by the madman of the Great Desert. Max's anti-bullying campaigns should concern you too. His mental problems don't only stop there, oh no, far from that. He also has a problem with being a jerk to everyone, trying to act nice and thankful to him, because apparently he likes his car more than his friends. His story goes on and on about how he wants to sail the desert with a fast car and will stop at nothing to achieve it. Huge ass sand dome filled with starving cannibals? Check. Driving an explosive rigged car? Check. Doing repetitive stuff over and over again? Check. Champ Bucket, on the other hand, Armagnacs' greatest ally yet, continually tries to serve Max as his one and only savior, the one chosen by the almighty combustion goddess herself. He wants to help Max, not just because he thinks he is the chosen one, but the fact that he wants to build a car faster than any other. See any similarities? Yeah, so they did too, and they decided it's best to stick around together. With Champ's black figures and the ability to tighten up the same bolt over and over again to magically repair the whole vehicle, not to mention his ability to pull fire extinguishers out of thin air, makes him and Max the perfect duo for the job. Or does it? Cause it's not long before things go astray, as Max's overwhelming ego becomes a problem for the ever-obeying Champ, who seems to be struck with him after a while. Poor Champ, having to deal with his master's strict orders and no thankfulness back. Oh well, in the story lots of characters really make a great appearance and stick to their roles and do the job as maniacs very well, which really makes the story kind of interesting, but the fact that side missions are necessary in order to proceed the main quest gets really boring really fast. Apart from the seemingly infinite jobs you have to partake in order to see what's next, the story missions are really none more than I can count on my fingers, and that particularly doesn't fit well with the movie that got produced earlier. Well, I know that it's not the same concept, but I still feel cars, dust and maniacs up my throat each time I try to think of one of these. What it lacks is basic drive, meaning having a road that goes up the way of hype to keep you interesting and entertained. While it's fun to interact with nut jobs, sooner or later you will realize that's the game's reality and it would get very tedious, that I promise you. Overall, Mad Max stays true to its style, making Max seem crazier and madder than ever, if that's even a word, but fails to keep up with the hype built in by the movie as it progressively gets even more boring every second you put into the game.
Now, when you think about Mad Max mechanics, the only thing I personally have to say you have to think like is open world the game, open world the game. You could also say that it's more like Ubisoft the game, but oh well, let's try not to confuse you with all that kind of stuff. So, what Mad Max is about when it comes to its open world elements? Well, it's about a lot of cars, a lot of busy work, and certainly a lot of content. There are areas you can liberate from Scrotus's influence by destroying different buildings and constructions of sorts, and also by freeing local outposts. By doing that, you make people that you work with establish them, and they give you a steady flow of scrap, which is the currency of the game. You also have to upgrade your car, with which you will fight and compete in races and so on and so forth. Now, when I talk about races, of course, I'm not talking about run-of-the-mill, go towards a track races, but as much of more of a Mad Max races. There is Barrel Mash, which is basically a normal race, but within every checkpoint you have to bash a barrel in order to proceed to the rest of the race. And there is also Free Roam, I think that's what it's called, where you can actually roam the wasteland freely as long as you land on the finishing line. Those races mean that no matter how fast your car is, it doesn't matter if you don't choose the optimal route, and that optimal route is never the one with the red thingy on it, you know, the red tracks. I think that's what it should be called. Further than that, there is also car combat, which is a big feature of the game and probably the most enjoyable part of it. Car combat is, well, always included in games in a sense, but mostly about just ramming things and killing people with your car. Here it's a fully fleshed out mechanic with many techniques you can perform, many weapons that you have in your car, and you can actually dispose your enemies with them. It's quite intriguing to see a game try vehicular combat, considering that it's not done all that much, and it's certainly appreciated. There is also ground combat, which is probably the most dull part of the game, because it's an Arkham style combat, not done not very well, considering there are not many things to switch up the gameplay. Hit enemies with the left mouse button, block enemies with the right mouse button. That's about it. You can pick up weapons and there are attacks that you cannot block. Well, even if there are attacks you cannot block, it's not like you will be able to lose or anything, considering that the game is extremely easy, as your enemies are kind of dumb as rocks. But if you want to buy this game, you'd certainly not buy it for the ground combat. Although there is a lot of it, and a lot of it is busy work, considering that if you could only just ram people with your car or harpoon them to murder them, it would be just so much better. Other than that, there are a lot of side quests in the game, and most of them have a certain amount of payoff, but most of it is not as good as you would expect considering the time you spent on them. The scrap that they give you is minimal, to say the least, and also the vehicles that you get are not the best either, considering that while the Magnum Opus might be the best vehicle, considering you can customize it however you want, the vehicles you get from the Wasteland are also kind of intriguing, because there are many playstyles fitted to them, such as, for example, the buzzard vehicle that can throw landmines and so on and so forth. Now, to wrap up the mechanics, one last thing I think I have to mention is how the Magnum Open works. So there are a lot of upgrades for that thing, and there are also Archangels. Archangels are some sort of pre-made cars. They include the Magnum Opus as a central part of the car, and then they have certain upgrades you have to purchase in order to make them work, and all of them are focused into one particular thing. Now, in general, the upgrades in the Magnum Opus are quite intriguing because they're not linear, and you have to choose between being fast, being slow and heavier, having more health, and so on and so forth, which is something that is actually far better than just going for a system one. If you put this upgrade, you just have more health or you do more damage. Also, you have to admit that customizing your car visually is not something that's been fleshed out all that well, because, well, it's just not been done. There are a few decals you can change, and also a few colors you can place to your car, but in order to get those colors, you have to complete some of these stupid outposts, and those take a while to do and are quite dull. But if you do not plan on doing dull, busy work, then just don't bother buying this game in general. I think that should be wrapping up what the mechanics are about, although, like I said, most of it is just not all that intriguing. There is no lore behind them, and unlike any of the Witcher games, and I'm saying Witcher because that's a review I was working on before this, if you compare it to any of the Witcher games, it really has nothing to show for itself. Only the mementos have a bit of storytelling in them, but even those are so sparse, and you have to actually search for them in the maze-like environments, meaning that you won't necessarily find them, and you won't necessarily find enough of them. Anyway, that should wrap up the mechanics. Yeah, that's about it. Not quite as interesting as you would have expected, is it? Okay, now, after talking about the mechanics, now let's talk a bit about the technical part of things, shall we? Maybe that's the most positive thing we have to say about Mad Max. The technical aspect of Mad Max is stellar. The texture quality may not be the best in the gaming industry, certainly not, but it's a desert and it's a good looking desert. The explosion effects look good, the cars look good, they feel good, and when you move at a high speed, you feel like you move at a high speed. The game does a very good job of showing that visually. It's really enjoyable to smash into other people, considering that the cars explode in really fashionable ways. Also, there's a camera mode where you're able to shoot screenshots of particular moments in your game, and you can even shoot videos and so on and so forth, which they weren't forced to, but they did. Anyway, Avalanche shows again that PC is their main platform by also having amazing performance. I was running this game on maximum settings and I haven't had a single frame drop below 60 FPS. Well, maybe I did, but it was mostly my issue more so than the game's. And I even tried running it in 2K, and I could actually, my machine can handle that. And yes, it's certainly a 780, but even Smooth Lemon had the ability to run this game in mostly maxed out settings in a stable frame rate. And the game doesn't look amazing, but it certainly looks good. The facial animations are dodgy, but the options menu is quite extensive. There are a lot of options there. Although there's not all that many AA options, which appears to be some of the issues I've been having with late PC ports. Now, for example, Metal Gear Solid 5 did this, and while playing Soma, I realized it did the same thing. It only has like FXAA, and FXAA is not a good AA. You can force like via the control panel of NVIDIA more AA options, but certainly FXAA does not cover it. But through and through, there are a lot of options that you can customize and play around with. The game runs amazingly well in every system I've tried it on, and I've tried it in several systems. Through and through, just a really good PC board. Just be careful. Some of the options go up to max, some others don't. It's quite inconsistent, which I think is kind of dodgy, because it would be nice if every particular option had, like, okay, I'm okay with 5 levels, but as long as every option has 5 levels. If this option has 3 levels, if this option has 5 levels, it's quite inconsistent and difficult to understand if you're actually maxed out or you haven't maxed out everything you can. Now, through and through, the game is pretty much as good as you could expect. Probably one of the best PC ports I've seen in a long time, and DLC so far has not been all that bad either. Now, to sum up, what is Mad Max? It's an open world game that's really generic. It has a lot of busy work, not a particularly intriguing or interesting story. The characters are of the Mad Max universe. There are a lot of twists here and there, and both to the gameplay and to the story. With a stellar PC port, I have to admit that it might not be at the top of your list of the games you should buy. No, that should probably be Transistor or Metal Gear Solid 5. But it's certainly a game that, with a huge price drop, if you're a completionist, you should definitely give a shot, because there's a lot of busy work and there are a lot of collectibles for you to find. I tried doing some of it and, well, I got bored really quickly, so I just kind of finished the story and wrote the review for it. But for, say, $15 or $20, it could be a lot of value for money, because it's a game that, to me at least, took over 45 hours just to complete all of the regions and gather some, like, about half of the mementos and half of the vehicles. But you can also do more with it, and I think it should probably go up to 8 hours. That's enough, I think. It has been Peanut Gamers signing out.